My name is Robert Hunt. I serve as a superintendent here at Chagrin Falls Schools. I want to thank you for coming to our third community meeting this year, fifth overall in the last 2 years, to continue the conversation regarding our facilities. And I want to quickly just go over our agenda for the evening. We'll obviously cover introductions of those that will be participating and presenting tonight. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about today's educational space. That was a comment or question that came up in our community forum, a Q&A that was held a couple of weeks back. So I want to briefly talk about education, what it looks like, and how space impacts education currently. I want to spend a lot of time there because really tonight we want to show you the initial conceptual drawings that have been developed for the scenarios that we're currently researching. That involves the pre-K 3, 4, 6 with shared space at Gurney Elementary, as well as pre-K 3 at Gurney Elementary and a renovation of Chagrin Falls Intermediate School to some the Philomathian building. Give you an idea of where that work is, what that looks like, and solicit your feedback on those initial concepts. We'll also introduce and share the design work that's being done at the main entrance of the high school as well. We'll open it up at the end. We've got volunteers from our PTO here. Open it up at the end to answer any questions that you might have or listen to feedback regarding what you do see. I do know it's difficult sometimes in a large space to see every detail that's on the screen. So this PowerPoint will be put up on the district website first thing tomorrow morning. So as long as this video, if you happen to know somebody that wasn't able to attend that would like to look at this information or hear more about it, please share. Finally, you do have a feedback sheet that was given to you, and we've got pens and pencils out in the foyer on the way out. If you have any feedback specific to what you see and what you hear this evening, maybe you're not comfortable grabbing a microphone and you'd like us to reach out to you personally and talk to you about some of the things that we are introducing tonight, feel free to give us that, write that down and we'll reach out and talk to you. I want to start this evening talking a little bit about education and kind of where we're at. And we are in 14 years into the 21st century, so this buzzword of 21st century education, I think really has been overused. And I think to look at where we're at now, you've got to look back a little bit, and you've got to think about some of the changes that have been thrust upon us as a school district. Probably the most significant changes that impact our facilities and the conversation we're having right now involve things like full day or preschool. Didn't used to be mandated. It was mandated upon us and took up about 2 of our classrooms. District made the decision to offer full day kindergarten. Used to be half day. If you think about the implications of space, we need double the classroom space to offer full day kindergarten. Things like IDEA, that's the education of special needs children. There was a time when special education was done down in that corner in that place. That's not how it is anymore. It's an inclusive model where we push students into classrooms. We provide services, we educate all students equally, and we provide a free and appropriate education by law. That has serious implications in terms of our space and our accommodations. If you go to Gurney Elementary right now and you walk around, you'll walk on the 3rd grade hallway and you'll see cabinets and books and storage at the end of the hallway, and you'll think, why isn't the custodian taking care of this, or our teachers putting things away? The reality is we've taken all of our storage closets to implement RTI, which is a response to intervention model to intervene with at-risk students. I don't want to complain about these changes because these changes are the right thing for kids. It's good, solid, quality education. It's identifying students where they're at, intervening where necessary, and providing those services. But they do have implications in terms of our space and our accommodations that have played into some of the issues that we're currently facing as a district. So moving on from those mandates, if you look at how does education maybe look differently than when I went to school? I think we all start good planning with beginning with the end in mind. So what are we trying to do? What are we preparing our students for at Chagrin Falls? We know 95–96% of our students are going to go on to post-secondary college education. That's obviously a need we need to prepare them for. We also know, if you look at statistics and studies on what do corporations, what do people that are hiring our students want, it's not someone who memorized the 50 presidents, because they can access all of that knowledge right now on all of their phones. It's students that can collaborate, students that can innovate and create. So I think those things are what is changing and driving change in education so much. We're not only teaching content, there's foundational knowledge every student needs, but we're teaching them in a way that provides those skills and teaches those skills. And that type of education has implications in terms of space. And you'll see a little bit of that from Mike here in a few minutes, just to give you kind of a visual representation. I think the last thing that I want to point out before we move into the actual design work in terms of education is, I just left a parent book study, and we were looking at Daniel Coyle's The Talent Code, and it's all about how you develop talent in young people. And we're having real meaningful, deep conversations about education and where it is. And where education is today is not the same place it was. It's not walk into a room, be forced in rows of 30, forced content, and taking a test at the end and move on regardless of how you scored. Most of our assessments are at the beginning. We find out where students are at. We then group, especially at our elementary schools, we group students based on the results of those tests. We then provide instruction, enrichment, all based on that. So a third grade classroom that does an assessment may not be with the same 20 kids for an entire lesson. They may be working with students down the hall. They will be flexible grouped based on their mastery of understanding. So the transition that is going on is, you don't move in education based on your age or how old you are or what you've been exposed to. You move based on mastery. So this old concept of we grade level accelerate, there's a lot of implications to that socially, and we've had experiences over the years. But what we'll do is maybe we'll content area accelerate. We have students in the intermediate school right now that have demonstrated mastery of 4th grade math. Does it make sense to have them sit there for an entire year? We move them on to 5th grade. We flexible group them within the 4th grade to really meet them where they're at. This has implications in terms of how we structure what and how we teach our young people. And we're going to show you a little bit of that tonight. I'm happy to talk to you more about change and what it looks like. This evening's really about to introduce some of the concepts and get to a point in the evening where you can ask some questions. But I wanted to start there because when you look at what is our core mission, what are we about? It's about educating young people. It's about providing the best possible experience to develop good citizens that are going to be successful. And that's the core of what we're trying to do with everything in our district, including the conversations regarding our facilities. Many of you that have been at meetings have seen Mike Carter before. I'd like to introduce Mike. He is the lead architect that is working with our district on evaluating plans. I'll tell you, he has put a ton of time into meeting with our teachers, our students, our community members, and doing a lot of listening to bring a design that, one, meets our needs, but two, really is valued, appreciated, and represents the quality of Chagrin Falls. So I'm going to have Mike take you through the next segment.
Everybody hear me? I'm a little low on voice tonight, so if you can't hear, raise your hand, please. So we want to talk about a couple of things tonight. The first one is more of a visualization of what Bob was just talking about, and what is different about education in 2014, and how are we planning for the future in the spaces that we design. So maybe it'll work. There we go. Okay. First of all, it's individual. We try to design spaces that allow students different ways of learning throughout it. And it might be something as simple as a little nook that they can sit in and work in. It might be that they want to work on the floor or work at a table together. But we want to provide a number of differentiated kind of spaces within the classroom and outside of it to allow students to learn the way that they learn best. It's small group learning. Furniture plays a big role in this, in providing furniture solutions that allow you to group tables. You can see here in a circle. You can pull them out and put them in a more traditional desk-type format, but it allows you to very quickly reconfigure the classroom to different types of learning styles and different types of small group projects, large group projects, or individual. It's hands-on. It's getting dirty. It's providing spaces where kids can get outside the classroom, roll up their sleeves and work on dirty projects as well as clean ones to really start to learn how to work as a team, how to solve problems, and get into a different mode than they were used to in the previous type of learning environment. It's extended learning. We're doing a lot more where we provide opportunities. You can see here this opening that extends the classroom out into the corridor and allows two different types of learning scenarios to go on with the same teacher, and provides a visual link so that the teacher can control what's going on in that space. It's engaging. We're providing places where students can collaborate, where they can go during their off periods, sit down and exchange ideas. It's said that the majority of learning happens outside the classroom, so we need to provide spaces for that to happen within the building. It's filled with natural light and fresh air, and there's numerous studies that point to better student performance, better attendance, better teacher attendance in classrooms where you get lots of natural light and lots of air exchanges so that the kids' attention span is better. And also providing things, and I think you can see them in this, speakers in the ceiling and assistive devices for the teacher so that the kids in the back row can hear. It puts education on display. In this picture you can see, this is the art room. The front door is behind you, so when you come into the building, the first thing you see is the stair that goes up to the upper level, and the art students working right in this space, so that you experience education, what other people are doing, you can share that experience as you work. It uses the building as a teaching tool. And here we have a green roof with a garden on top, and the students use that as part of their science classes. And finally, it's outdoor learning. At this particular school, this deck is up in the canopy of the trees, and they hold science classes out there, they hold reading sessions out there, and they can experience what's going on up in the canopy of the trees. And that can happen in the canopy, it can happen down at the ground, and you've got some opportunities at your sites to enhance that. Whoops, I skipped by too fast. So, the size of classrooms has changed as well in modern schools. In the time that schools were built here in Chagrin, a 650 square foot classroom was pretty typical. A lot of, at the intermediate school, they range from 550 to 650. Some of them are a little bigger at Kearney, but there are a lot of 600 square foot classrooms. And the difference is that in a typical classroom scenario where you have 5 rows of desks and a desk up front, that works pretty well at 650 square feet. But to use the precepts that we've been talking about before this, you need some room. You need some room to spread out. You can see here, this is an 850 square foot classroom. A lot of light, a lot of room around these tables, so when you start to reconfigure things, you can work in small groups, you can work in different corners of the room without having to go out of it. So let's talk a little bit about process, where we've come to date. After we finished the master plan and started to embark on this design process, we did a series of meetings that we call a discovery workshop. Discovery workshops happen with faculty, with students, with administrators, with members of the public, where we were drilling in to find out the unique characteristics of Chagrin Falls schools. We went out took groups out to visit some schools, both here in Northeast Ohio and actually some in Pittsburgh, that were exemplars of the kind of educational spaces that we're looking for. We had programming meetings where we sat down with the administration, with teachers, and started to talk about how many classrooms do we need, what other amenities go with that, what are the adjacencies of those, what needs to be close to what. Do we want 2 libraries, 1 library, 1 gym, 2 gyms, those kind of questions. We had the community Q&A meeting a couple of weeks ago over in the cafeteria. And now we're starting to create preliminary designs, and we'll share those with you tonight at our community input session right now. Whoops. There we go. After that, after we finish developing these preliminary concepts, then we're going to start to put some numbers to them. We've got 2 estimators that are going to be putting some preliminary costs onto these concepts and start to generate budgetary numbers that we can look at and compare. Then we're going to have a preliminary presentation to the school board on the 5th of January, sharpen up our pencils and deal with the input that we get from there. And then a final presentation to the board on the 20th of January. So that's the process we'll do early in the year. So let's take a look at what we've come up with. At Gurney, we were asked to look at building 2 schools in 1 building, a PK3 and a 4-6 that share common amenities. And you'll see as we move into the drawings how that works. The schools will be sharing food service and kitchen, gymnasium, media center, music and art suite. The clinic and the main office will all be shared amenities that separate the 2 schools, the 2 sections into 2 schools. We have about 135,000 square feet. It'll have a capacity of 1,150 students, and it sits on 32 acres out on Bell Street. The building block of this is what we call a grade house. And for each grade, there's going to be 6 classrooms, which is similar to what you have now in the buildings. And what we've come up with for this grade house is 6 classrooms that are clustered around a breakout space. And that breakout space will allow individual classes to go out and work on projects, groups from multiple classes, interclass interaction. This one has a little area over here for individualized work. And so what does that look like? Sorry. Okay. So this is an example of how that breakout space works. We have classrooms on this side of the hallway, and then the corridor comes down here, and then it opens up into this brightly lit space where students can come out and interact, work on projects either by themselves or in groups. And it provides a lot of flexibility in terms of getting 1 class together or 2 classes together. And that's kind of the building block of what we've come up with for this plan. So then taking those, there'll be, as I said, 1 for each grade. So in PK through 6, of course, that's 7, so it doesn't work out very well in terms of pairing them up, but we'll show you what we've come up with. These are the grade houses out here on the perimeter. And on this side, which is the PK3 side, you have two-story elements, here and here. Kindergarten on the bottom, first grade on the bottom, second and third on the upper floors. On this side, you have 4, 5, and 6. There'll be a one-story element. And then in the center, you have all of those shared elements. The front doors are here. There would be 2 separate front doors. The main office in the middle. Your clinic is in there, your principal offices, workspace for the administrators. Then across a wide hall, the gymnasium. Behind that, food service, the kitchen that serves 2 dining rooms, one for the lower grades, one for the upper grades. Your music and art here, teacher interaction spaces in this area, and then a media center in the rear. Another alternative on that is similar, but a little different in the way it lays out on the site. Our staff said it's the tiger paw plan. So the classroom wings come off the rear of the building. This one has a separate media center for each of the upper grades and the lower grades. And then you see here's the food service, gymnasium, this is the music and art, and then there's a spot here for a potential of an auditorium. And then, on both of them in this front area are playgrounds for each side of the schools. So looking at the site plan, how this lays out on the site, the existing Gurney School sits down in here. And what we're proposing to do is the transportation garage is up in this area. And this right now is currently all play fields, which in this plan we wouldn't have to disturb too much. We're going to have to pick up some detention basins on the front of the property because the new rules for runoff that have been in effect probably about 10 years say that we can't have any more runoff from this site in its new configuration than we did in its old configuration. So we're going to have to detain the water. So I'm sorry, I'm getting button happy here. There we go. 2 detention basins here in the front. The transportation garage moves down to the front of the site so that the buses don't have to penetrate all the way to the back. And this is also the fueling station for South Russell and Chagrin, correct? So Chagrin Fire, South Russell Fire use this as their fueling station. So we can keep, in this plan, keep all those vehicles from penetrating all the way back to the school, which they do now. They go around the west side of the school to fuel. And the buses will all stay up here in the front. Parking field here in front of the building. And then we have, what we've done and what we always try to do in these plans is separate parent drop-off traffic and bus traffic. You don't want the kids having to go in between the buses to get in the door. So this loop is the bus drop-off loop. This loop is the parent drop-off loop. And parking fields inside of those. Right now we're showing the 97 wing of the existing Gurney School being repurposed for a central office. That would sit here where it always has been. The bus is here, and then you see here, this is the layout of the school property. And we'll take questions on all these when we get done. So the next piece, by popular demand, we were asked to take a deeper dive into the intermediate school. And we took a really hard look at how do you take the building and deal with pretty much the existing footprint, but make it work more effectively as a 3-grade school. So with got 89,000 square feet in there. We're proposing a small addition, and we'll show you why as we move through it. We still only have our 3.4 acres. The enrollment's still 480. But we're gonna talk about significant floor plan changes to make it work better, to resolve the accessibility issues, to maintain the gym and the auditorium, and you'll see we're gonna propose a move of the playground to provide better parking access for the site. So, we're calling this the ground level, and I think everything that's on here touches the ground, but none of them are at the same level as anything else, so bear with us a little bit. This area up here is the 1914 building, the original Chagrin Falls School, and what you're seeing here is the area that's affectionately known as the pit. In our plan, the pit will become the new mechanical room. It's not really very useful for other purposes, so we're going to move all the mechanicals in the building over into this area. In this plan, we're going to be putting a ducted HVAC system in so we can heat and air condition and get rid of the steam radiators that are in the building now. So all the mechanicals are going to be new anyway, so if we move the room, and we'll show you why it's important to do that. So we're going to move the main office from up here by the traditional front entry door down to this area adjacent to the gymnasium. And what that provides us with is grade level access to the front office, handicap accessible access, and a more centralized location for that office so it's easier to keep an eye on what's going on throughout the building. Then this area right here, which is now art and music, we're going to move the cafeteria from the 3rd floor down to grade level, which will provide better access for supplying it, and then we're proposing a small 3,600 square foot addition that runs across the front of it to allow that to be a proper sized cafeteria. That's the only addition that we're proposing to the building, and that's in the rear of the building. The gym and the auditorium are still in their current location, obviously. Down at grade level right now, there is a music room down there, and the boiler room is in this vicinity. What we're proposing to do, because we won't need that boiler room anymore, is that this entire level, which all connects, if you take, you have to go down and up to get to it right now, but it all connects, that this will all be music on this one level, and all with exterior access so we can get some lighting, etc. We talked about handicap accessibility, and right now, as the building stands, you have an elevator here on the outside of the building, and another one in this vicinity that serve the 1914 building and the 1947 building, or really only up to about here. But you can't get from one to the other. So what we're proposing is an elevator right here that straddles the line between the 1914 and the 47 building, and that'll be a double door elevator. It'll have doors on the front and the back. You've probably seen those. So it'll allow you to get off here in the 14 building and off here in the 47 building. So it'll provide access all the way up and down this whole area. Another elevator will be located right here. And the same thing, because there's a level change here. So it'll be a double door elevator that allows you to traverse both of those. So with those two, you pretty much have accessibility throughout the whole building, which you have not had to date. So moving upward now, This area is the existing library, and the existing cafeteria is here. The problem that you have right now is to get from the 1914 building over to this classroom wing required you to go through the cafeteria, which at times could be rather difficult. So this space now will become a media center, a computer lab, and a student commons that runs all the way from this point over to the stairwell to the 1914 building. So it's going to be an open area and we've shown some examples of that where the library is more of an open space that students are encouraged to come into and traverse through. There'll be computers there, there'll be collaborative learning spaces there. It'll become a really interesting spot. And then, I keep pushing the wrong button, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Proposing to put this is the addition, and put a green roof on that. Art is up in this area, project lab, a community room, and then on each of the floors, this spot right here is a faculty interaction space. So that on each floor, you have that space, and then this is the corridor that comes out from the elevator. Down in this area would be the 4th grade wing of 6 classrooms plus a science room. And then as we move upstairs, we have the 6th grade wing here, another faculty space. 5th grade wing here, we didn't color the faculty space differently there. And then a collaboration space that connects the two. So this provides the full program of the intermediate school. It's restacked everything and has resolved the issue of handicap accessibility. The other problem that we recognized in the building, but not really in the building, but outside the building, was that you currently have this play yard here, which in non-school times is a parking lot, but during the school day, it's gated off and used as a play yard. That's created a parking problem on the site because all you have for parking is this spot, and then wrapping around the building there was about 12 spaces in the rear of the building. We're proposing to take that play yard and put it back here where that little loop of parking is. It provides a more private, controllable space for play. Takes out 12 spaces there, but probably adds, we didn't do a count, probably on the order of 40 or 50 spaces on the front. So it resolves that issue. And then the soft surface play area that runs across the front here would move to this location on the side of the building so that you can, a monitor can look at both the hard play area and the soft play area at once. So that's the intermediate school. So a couple of considerations with that is that the swing space is still required. So to do this is a major renovation. So to accomplish that, we're going to have some swing space. So that will happen by building a new PK3 at Gurney, because we still need to resolve the problem with the old Gurney building. When that is done, we'll move PK3 students into the new building. The existing Gurney building will become swing space for probably 2 school years. And then we can have that building completely empty so it can be renovated. The new school obviously has to be built before that happens. So what that results in, by the time you get through with design of the new school, construction of the new school, and then getting to the renovation, you're probably looking at about 4 years total before this whole process is done. At the high school, we were asked to look in this building at the front door, basically. As you know, when you come in the front door of the high school, you met with a staircase in front of you, which isn't very welcoming for people with handicaps. The office is up there, and you can't really see what's going on at that front door. So you have some security issues, you have some accessibility issues, and you have a space that's not very student-friendly. So what we've been asked to do is create a student commons that when you come in the front door, it's welcoming, it's activated as a student space, and it connects to a renovated media center that becomes sort of the student hub of the building. So we have a couple of different schemes here to show you. One's a little more radical than the second one's a little more radical than the first. But right now, the doors to the building are right here. And you come in and right in front of you is the staircase. And then over here is the main office, principal's office, assistant principal, guidance, etc. What we're proposing in this plan is to move the front office, the main office, the attendance office, down to this grade level. Put a small addition onto the front of the building, so that when you come in these doors right here, during the school day, it forces you to come into the main office and check in, which provides a much greater level of security. And we're going to do something like that down at this end of the building in the middle school as well. Inside of that, so now we have a little extra space here with a colonnade that runs across down the middle of it. Some more queuing space for the gym and for people coming in. We're going to create a stepped seating area that traverses between this upper level and the lower area. It juts out into that area. And then a ramp for handicap accessibility that winds up and comes up onto this level. The offices have come out, except for guidance. We're going to leave guidance here because what we found is that students feel a lot more comfortable going to the guidance office when they don't have to go into the principal's office to get there. So, and that's no offense to any of the principals if you're here. But we've done this in a number of facilities, and the guidance counselors tell us they're getting a lot more traffic of kids just coming in to talk or, look at college information. So the guidance will stay where it is, but they will open this whole area up. So this whole area inside the front door is now a student interaction space where students can come and sit, talk, study, work on projects. And I think we showed you one of the slides early on. This is similar to something that was done at Rocky River High School, where they created this interaction space. So popular that once it opened, we had to order more furniture because it was so crowded that the kids were using it so much. So what we're trying to do is create that interaction space right here in the heart of the plan. Then come in here and kind of remake this the media center so it's less a library and now more of a media center. It has a couple of different levels in it, so we're going to be trying to accomplish those, create some soft seating. What we've seen over the years in media centers is the collections are shrinking because, a lot of the reference materials are obsolete the day they hit the shelf. And everybody's using computers to get all their reference material because it's absolutely up to date. So there's going to be more computers in here, more interaction space, and try to create a connection out here to the cafeteria. We also added a spirit shop right here as sort of adjunct to that whole student interaction space. Now with that, in this scheme, the central offices now that are down on the lower level will now house the principal's office, the assistant principal, And a lot of the functions that are now on that upper level. The more radical scheme takes all of those functions, puts them out here, builds out even further. So your principal's in this lineup, the assistant principal, everybody's in one spot. Now the difference with this scheme is you still have your door here, you still have that passive entry, but the ramp now runs up across the face of the library and comes into here. And what that does is it gives us another level of handicap accessibility because you have some lever changes that impact access to the cafeteria. So the idea is to get a better connection between this student activity space and the cafeteria as well. And that's it. That's kind of a glimpse. We're working on some other pieces of the puzzle. This is definitely a work in progress. This is not the end of the game by any means. These are concepts. We're going to be continually working on them into January and beyond. What ends up coming out as the physical manifestation of this may be somewhat different, maybe a lot different as we continue to develop the plan. But this is where we're at, and we wanted to open the floor for your comments and questions.
So I just want to reiterate the timeline, and then we've got some volunteers with microphones so everybody can hear if you have questions. Michael, as he said, he will continue to work. We're going to take feedback tonight, give that to him. They'll continue to modify these designs. January 5th, they'll give a board update and kind of progress on where they're at. And January 20th, all of these concepts will be presented to the board with costs, obviously. The other piece of this is we originally the master plan, and at some point there was an article that said $65 million worth of work. There was a lot of work identified all the way throughout the district. The facilities committee's already pared that down with the Board of Education on, okay, let's take a deeper look at these projects specifically. So because these are being presented tonight does not mean this is what we're doing and this will be what is on the ballot. This is what we're gaining more information on, getting hard numbers on so we can make some decisions. The Board of Education on Monday night spent a lot of time looking at finances and debt capacity, and all of that obviously plays into these decisions going forward. So with that, I think I would like to open it up and answer questions from the community feedback regarding the concepts. Again, you have a handout. We'll ask you to give us some feedback as well on the way out if that's more comfortable. But if you can just raise your hand if you have any questions or comments.
Are we working with Ohio, and I think they've changed their name, but Ohio School Facility Commission, and if not, why not? And what were the considerations that went into that?
Sure, Mike, can you jump in if I'm not completely accurate, but the Ohio School Facilities Commission, if you don't know, there was a tobacco settlement. That money was utilized to provide school facilities, and schools were ranked basically based on wealth, richest to poorest, and they started working down the list. Where we fall on that list, our share would be less than 3%, and I don't say that lightly. Any support from the state would be beneficial to offset costs. However, once you enter into their program, you now have to meet their design specifications, which would far exceed that cost. I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah, and we did have a lot of discussion about school facilities funding, and you're correct, they have changed their name now, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, just to confuse everybody. But they do their rankings, and it is funded annually. They fund a certain number of districts. I think this year they funded about a dozen. There's 619 school districts in the state. They're in the high 300s right now. Chagrin is over 6. They're in the last 20 districts to be funded. What that means is you're probably looking at 5 to 7 years before you get to that 3%, and the weighting will far outweigh the cost of money over years will far outweigh that 3% that you get from the state. And as Bob said, it puts some restrictions on you in terms of what you can and can't do with their funding. So after a lot of consideration, I think it was decided by the building committee and the board that the better approach is to get it done sooner and not wait for that 3%.
I just want to begin by saying thank you for your presentation. I think you guys are doing a great job. Very impressed to see all the designs you come up with. My question is in regards to the renovation of the intermediate school versus the complete rebuild of the new schools. What is your lifespan of the intermediate school if the renovation is completed there versus the lifespan of building the 2 new schools on Bell Street?
You know, typically we look at new facilities as having a 50-year lifespan. The older part of the intermediate school is already 100 years old. The new addition is almost 75 years old. We can do a lot to improve that, but at the end of the day, you still have a pretty old building that you've started with. So that's definitely something that weighs into the consideration of the pros and cons of which way to go. I would say that, you know, we'll be putting all new systems in it. So you're probably looking at least 30-year lifespan of it. You come in, as long as you don't get any, you know, hidden structural failures or something that we haven't perceived yet.
And then versus the new school?
Versus the new school at 50 years.
I guess my question is along the same vein. First, I want to thank you for adding in the details about the intermediate school, for listening to the community and adding that. Much appreciated. When you're talking about adding new systems, does that include windows? Does that include flooring? Does that include walls? You know, what all is involved?
Yeah, we're talking about a complete gut renovation of this building, so that we'll have new heating, ventilating, air conditioning, new plumbing, new electrical, new windows, you know, repair the brick in the walls, new roof, all new finishes. So yes, they would have all of that.
So it's largely a new school in a historic envelope? I mean, is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, it will be. You know, obviously, everything you see and touch will be new, and you know, but you still have the bones that are quite old.
Thank you.
What is the cost of the deconstruction or the renovate? You know, before you can even start to build the new, if you were to renovate the intermediate school, I mean, I know you don't have cost estimates, but I can't imagine that's a small cost item.
It's not a small cost item, and that's what we're exploring now. With the, you know, now that we've come up with a scheme that, you know, we agree works, now we have to put some numbers to that to determine, you know, how much deconstruction there is and how much that's going to cost to do it right.
And one other follow-up. What is it, if we were to build a new school for 450 children, what would the normal acreage that you would look to put, you know, a school on for that number of kids?
For 450, probably about 20 acres.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned that the old standard was about $650 a square foot per classroom, migrating to $850 for the new standard. How does that work with the renovation of the intermediate school? Are you able to do that, and you're able to also gain the collaborative workspaces that you spoke of?
Well, what we're showing there right now is 650 square foot classrooms. The classroom wings in there, the issue with them is that the dimension across from the corridor wall to the exterior wall, which are the two bearing walls, which we can't really mess with too much. You know, we can cut some openings in them, but we can't take them out. That 22-foot dimension is very narrow, and so to get to 800 square foot, you're looking at a 40-foot depth or 40-foot length of the classroom, which is, you know, pretty long. You're much better off if they're more square in putting those kind of classrooms together. And to convert them all to 850, we don't have enough space in the building.
By doubling the size of the current school property, is there going to be enough water to handle the daily use capacity as well as fire protection needs that are going to be needed in this school, and how is that going to be addressed?
Yes, fortunately the site, until recent years, there's two aquifers that serve that site. The shallow aquifer, which they're utilizing right now, and the homes that surround it, is a little lesser quality and capacity than the deep, which is 400 and some odd feet down. And the deep aquifer can provide a little more capacity. And now, in terms of fire protection, what we'll do is something similar to what they did at Kinston High School, which is also on a well system, is that we will have a storage tank that can feed the sprinklers. So we'll keep, and that's, at Kinston, it's actually above the boiler room, so you get the gravity feed. And that will provide enough capacity in storage for the sprinklers. And then I know at Kinston they did this, and we probably think we do it the same way, is they run their domestic water through that tank as well, so it keeps moving. So it provides you with plenty of capacity, because if you start to drain it down a little bit, overnight it can fill up.
But to piggyback on that, neither building currently, because of when they were built and renovated, neither building currently has sprinkler systems.
Right.
But with either one of these projects, they would be required.
They are required to fill them down.
I sort of have two questions. The first is, if we build this new school, is it built to be expanded as education models change? Like, is it going to be built to be open for renovation, unlike what you're sort of suggesting with the bearing wall issues that we face with the intermediate school?
Yes, we would make it expandable, so that if there is expansion, or if the model changes.
And then my other question was, I went to school, my high school was built in the 70s, and they had that phase where they were into collaborative space, so we had those accordion walls, which were not soundproof and very annoying. So how do you deal with soundproofing and visibility blockage? So if you're taking a test, you're not looking at everybody else, like how does that work into these new design systems?
Acoustics have become extremely important in schools, and part of the LEED regulations for schools has to do with getting acoustic separation between classrooms, because they realize how important that is. And we're not proposing an open plan school like you're talking about. That was a very dark period in school design. And part of the problem was they never really treated the acoustic issues. But we need to make sure that you get that acoustical privacy at the same time as having the ability to open things up. She has a mic right now, so.
Okay. My husband has come to the previous meeting, so I apologize if you've already answered this question. Is there a significant difference for how long the students would be displaced in one model versus the next? And how are you going to handle those students during that time?
Okay. If we build the PK3, 4, 6 school at Gertie, it would take probably from the time you would pass a bond issue. To complete the design would be a year. And then probably another 15 to 18 months, depending on when you get started, to build. You wouldn't be displacing anybody in that model because you build it up in the back corner, and then when it's done, you just move into it. Both schools would move in. If we do the renovation model, then really, for the first 2.5 years, the intermediate students would stay in the intermediate school till the new PK3 was complete. Then they would move into the PK3, or into the old Gurney building, I'm sorry, for another 18 months while we renovated the intermediate school. So it's a total span of about 4 years. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Two comments and one question for clarification. Thanks for the presentation, very professional, very well done. I think this is really an exciting time for Chagrin Falls to continue to be an education leader, and concepts are exciting. If we went with the renovation of the intermediate school and only built then the PK 3-4 on the Gurney site, what would happen with those common spaces that you showed in the model PK 3-4 and 5-6? It would be a condensed version of that?
It would be kind of a condensed version of it with that. Probably, let me get back to the, so take a second to bear with me. Be more like we call the tiger paw scheme. One. Okay. So it would be somewhat similar to this scheme, but probably you would take this grouping, kind of either move it to the back, so that they faced each other, the openings faced each other, and then these components would get smaller.
But on the same site that you're contemplating?
On the same site, yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I was confused in this one. Are there still the play areas? What happens to the play areas? I mean, I'm sorry, not the playgrounds, the playing fields.
So the play fields right now are in this area right here, starting about here and moving up through here. We lose very little of that. The softball field is down in this area right now, and then the soccer fields kind of stretch up through here. So most of that area would be maintained as play fields.
But wasn't that just in the first plan, not in the one that looks like the tiger paw?
That one would lay out on the site a little differently, but and it might encroach a little bit in here, but it's not that much different.
The other conversation we've had is as it's more defined on where it would actually be and what it would look like. We've had some initial conversations with South Russell about potentially replacing anything that is displaced here on an area of the park that's eligible for that. Now, I was actually surprised that we were able to preserve as much as we were able to here, but that conversation at least is ongoing.
What about the traffic on Bell? I currently have a preschooler and a first grader, and I know that all I do all day is go up and down Bell, and I'm with a lot of other parents doing that. So if we then double that traffic, how does that work?
Well, one of the approaches of putting the school in the rear of the site was to allow for a lot more queuing space, because right now your queue stops right here. And so this allows a lot more queuing space into the site so that you can get the traffic off of Bell. And you know, there's going to be probably some discussion about how you start and end classes. You might stagger the lower grades and the upper grades by some 15 minutes or something like that. That's often done so that it helps alleviate some of that. Well, one of the things we are looking at in how we placed it on the site was to allow a lot more queuing space on the site so that it doesn't stretch out on the bell. Yep.
I have, thank you very much. I'm really excited about the intermediate plan. But there's obviously a lot of thought put into both of these plans. I've got two follow-on questions to what our fellow community members have asked. The first one is about the traffic. By adding queuing space, I still don't see how that would alleviate the traffic on Bell itself. If you're doubling the volume and you're doubling the drivers, because none of these kids are going to be driving, how that impacts the traffic on Bell.
Well, probably, I'm guessing that a good number of the students who are in the village now would be taking buses out there. There's obviously going to be more traffic. And, I think there's discussions to come up about potential turning lanes off of Bell. And also, we do have enough room in this right-of-way that we could add another lane coming inbound, which would also help that. Traffic studies will definitely be part of that.
It will be part of it.
Oh, absolutely.
So there could be a potential that we'll have a 4-lane highway on Bell one day? I mean,
Well, I would say we have more drivers here, and we operate on a two-lane. With our student drivers, the number of students that come here every day, and part of the reason we're able to manage it is the queuing space and the ability, to stretch that traffic around. So, point well taken, but I do think it's manageable without a 4-lane highway on Bell.
yeah. Okay, I'm a parent of a teenager here, and I leave 35 minutes early so that I don't stay in that queuing, just so you know. The other question is a follow-up on the lifespan of the buildings. And I'm sorry if I just misunderstood this. You said a brand-new building has a lifespan of 50 years.
That's what we designed to.
A
lot of those buildings end up sticking around longer.
I mean, because how old is the intermediate school? It's 100 plus?
100 years old.
I mean, okay. I have a 100-year-old home, and I hope it lasts another 100 years as well. So I'm just wondering how we build brand new today for half the lifespan of the buildings that we hope to maintain for another 100 years.
I think a lot of that has to do with first cost. And, it's just a plain fact that they don't build them like they used to. If we did that, we could build it. But, I think the other consideration is that after 50 years, we don't know what education is going to be like. So, the thought pattern is, let's build it for a 50-year lifespan, and it's probably going to be vastly different needs at the end of 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
I could probably speak about mine.
Is there any concern at all about what you might find inside the intermediate school once demolition begins? Asbestos is the word, I think.
I'm sure that we're going to find some, and when we put our estimates together, there will be allowances for hazardous material removal. There has been abatement done. What we usually find is buried in the walls when you start taking things apart. I think pretty much everything we've seen there, the stuff that's out in the open is abated.
How much is that going to add to the cost? Or do you have a percentage that you throw
Usually
in?
we put a percentage on it, and we'll walk the building with our estimators so they can kind of have some thoughts.
Educated guess?
It's an educated guess, yeah.
Thank you.
We're very, important to remember, we're preliminary in all of this, so.
I totally understand. I'm just saying.
We'll put contingencies on it for those eventualities.
It's an additional expense, yeah.
Hi, thanks for doing the intermediate school renovation because I really think it's important to preserve the history of our village and our town. And I have two boys that are in high school and have gone through the intermediate school and have experienced the whole, you know, it's just a wonderful place right there in the village. And I think moving that away is going to take away from the village. But I do think that there needs to be renovations, and your ideas are beautiful. Back to the Gurney Bell thing, have you thought at all about the busing? Now you're going to have a lot more students, you're going to have to bus. Now I have kindergartners also, and my girls on the bus for 65 minutes on the way home. I can't even imagine with all these other kids, like how long are they going to be on the bus?
Well, I'd like that bus number before you leave tonight.
Oh, yeah, I'll give it to you because I go with the bus every
The other
day.
piece, we've done a study, we actually anticipate a reduction in busing if we were to go with that model, by either a route or two. That's the study and the information that we're showing.
You're going to reduce the busing by moving everybody out there?
Yes.
And also, if bus rides are too long, then parents drive, and that's where you're going to get all the
That's why you have more
traffic.
people.
Previously, you mentioned, some gentleman asked if you were to build an intermediate school now or a school for 400 kids, you would need, or you would recommend like 20 some odd acres.
Right.
I see the intermediate school as almost like an urban school. So obviously like a school in Cleveland doesn't need, or you couldn't possibly have 20 something acres. So I'm just wondering, where does that come from? And
Well, the School Facilities Commission has put together a couple of binders about that thick of all the things that they recommend for schools in Ohio. And it's a pretty good go-by for how you put a school together. And the 20 acres is a recommendation, and it's a sliding scale based on how many students are in the school. But in a greenfield school, that's what they're recommending for a school that size. And we have 32 acres out in Gurney now. So.
Is there a different recommendation for an urban or a, not that Chagrin is urban, but is there a different recommendation in different spaces?
They don't actually do a recommendation for urban schools because in general the urban school is what you've got.
They acknowledge, okay.
They acknowledge that in an urban school you're going to work with less. You know, but that acreage has to do with providing play fields, providing parking, you know, the circulation around, all those things that you need.
On the Philadelphian school, I was talking to one of my granddaughters who is not there anymore, and I said to her, so what do you think about the Philadelphian school? And she said to me, she said, Nana, if you can make it through Philadelphian school, you can make it anywhere. Also, I have a question on the building. Is it a flat roof?
For the most part, it's flat roofs. There's actually several different levels of roof there.
Did you ever think of building above the school that exists, the Sands, well, I'm sorry, not call it the Sands, Gurney?
Oh, building above Gurney?
Yes.
Well,
putting a second story on it.
That building probably isn't structured to have a second floor above it. First of all, the roof is, you'd have to take the whole roof off, put a floor in. And the issues at Gurney, I don't think it's an issue of building more space on top of it because you got plenty of ground space to work with there. But the existing Gurney school has a lot of issues that we've talked about here. probably close to half of the classrooms in that building, and maybe more, do not have windows. And natural light is so important. The systems in it are again, pretty worn. And putting a second story on that, I'm not sure, now part of it is 2 stories. The 97 wing is a 2-story wing. That was built new from the ground up. I don't think that putting a second story on it will solve the problems.
I will say though, in the master plan of renovation, not building on top, but trying to work with that was one of the options we talked about. One of the biggest issues where do you put kids during that time, and displacement and swing space and things of that nature is another major issue with that option.
Thank you for the presentation. My family just moved here a couple of years ago and live in the village, and one of the reasons for moving to the community was obviously that idea of walking to the school and having it part of the community. And so, would love the presentation on the intermediate school. Any thought given to possibly making the intermediate school K-6 and having village students and people who live out Solon Road attend there, and have Bainbridge and the other South Russell communities going to Gurney? I'm sure, obviously, student size, population in the building might not work, but...
I mean, it was K-6 at one time, I think, and you know,
it's been everything at one time.
It's been everything.
I think the biggest issue there is space, parking, limited footprint. I think we've pretty much talked about every option at one point or another, and I think those are some of the major issues that involve that.
And I think the model that a lot of school districts are going to is consolidating the grade levels rather than spreading them out geographically, putting the grade levels together because it promotes more collaboration between teachers, provides better opportunities for differentiated learning in the buildings. So, you know, I think having 2 6th grade units and 2 5th grade units probably detracts from the education model rather than enhancing it.
And I do want to respond to, I think, in the last two. Obviously, there's a lot of things to consider in the decision, and location, and tradition, and history is important and recognized, and we hear that, and we'll bring that to the decision. Walking to school is recognized and part of that. There's the financial aspects, and there's the educational aspects as well. So all of these prongs have to be kind of weighed out, and I can tell you that I've been contacted almost in every one of those areas with people that have opinions on both sides of those areas. So it's this conversation and this ongoing conversation on where we end up and really what the best plan that our community can support is why we're here, and we're continuing to have, you know, the dialogue. And we're very cognizant at the end of the day, voters have to make a decision. I mean, it's not, we'll make a decision, choose it, and we're just going to do it. There's a whole other layer to this that involves voters making a decision on the economics as well. So we appreciate that, we understand that, and we're certainly bringing it to the table and looking at every possible option to bring to the Board of Education.
Well, operationally, what are the cost synergies of going from 3 campuses to 2? I mean, I'm sure you can't quantify it completely, but is that a benefit?
Yeah, there's no question there's a consolidation cost. We talk, you know, transportation, you know, there's both, you know, the personnel and the efficiency. I'm a little hesitant on the efficiency side because you're going to move from a buildings that don't have air conditioning to buildings that, you know, do provide that. So I'm not out kind of pushing that figure. Current operations with just maintaining is about $350,000 for the buildings. A consolidation obviously is going to improve that efficiency on the operational side.
Is that just utilities and stuff?
Yeah. That's just keep the doors open and heat it. And we heat one way, it's full bore.
So, do we think that our population is going to stay the same? Have you studied, you know, are we building these buildings big enough? Are we building too big? What's the guess of?
The district, 2 years ago, I believe, refinanced bonds to kind of leverage the interest rates at the time and able to pay off some of our outstanding bonds a little early. Part of that presentation for the bond rating included a demographic study, including enrollment studies and projections. We are seeing a dip at our elementaries right now, and I think you're seeing that statewide. If you think about when the economic downturn happened, those students are kind of kindergarten age. When we look at our 10-year projections, we're pretty steady and level with our student enrollment.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with the different plans, and my one concern is the unintended consequences of taking the intermediate school out of the village. I know you have addressed this, but that is part of the fabric of the village. The parking lot is a public space. The facilities are a public space, and it will become a private space. And when it becomes a private space, that impacts the neighboring properties. It impacts the Federated Church, where I was just at a funeral with 500 people attending, and the only parking at that time was in the intermediate school. And for events throughout the village, Blossom Time, Art in the Park, we use those facilities for events in our community, and the school has been a good partner for these events. But once we take that away, and I would like to say that everyone in the private aspect or sections of town like to share their parking spaces, but they don't. They put up signs that say no parking, so there's a lot of unintended consequences that may occur with a change from going to a public space to a private space in a community that has well supported the schools throughout time. You are the third superintendent that has come before me as a resident of Chagrin Falls, while I was paying attention, because as a child I didn't, that has asked for money for new facilities, changes, and it's been about every 15 years or less. So once we get this done, there'll be another change that comes before this community. I want them to be mindful of the financial impact upon the residents and upon the village when we make these changes, because they're huge. They're huge.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're referring to the tax implications of moving out and finances.
No, I'm not talking about the finance. I'm just talking about
we covered that at our last meeting.
No, just talking about how the community works, how
Sure.
it's part of the fabric, how the Federated Church, for example, works with the intermediate school for parking, how the school uses the Federated Church, how the community uses the parking lot, how the kids walk to school. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we may regret that we have lost later after it's gone. Similar to the theater that was in town, that at that time it was obsolete and too small and all these things, wasn't making any money, but now it would have been useful. People would have embraced it as an arts opportunity. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I think I've covered this. I mean, there's a lot of dimensions to the decision, and we are considering all of them. We always start with our core mission, and it's educating kids, and doing that well, and we've done a very good job of that, and we will continue to do that. And that will drive decisions. But we do understand there's many layers to this, and we're trying to take every one of those into consideration.
I don't have a microphone, but I have a loud voice. I agree with everything she just said. But also, I was wondering, and maybe you covered this at one of the other meetings, but it seems that, so this new school will have, what, 1,500 people coming to it every day? It's almost half the population of South Russell. How much time has been put into thinking about how much it's going to affect the South Russell Police and all the other things in South Russell that aren't currently geared toward that many people being around?
We've met with Mayor, gone to council, we've updated them along the way. I will tell you, both Chagrin and South Russell, in terms of our services, are exceptional. I mean, if you drop off your students at school, we have police here, they're present, they're visible. I won't speak to their staffing levels and things of that nature, that's not in my realm. But I'm very, very confident in the service that we receive from both both villages.
But Southwest will obviously have to incur costs on its own to support that bigger school.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. That's not in my realm, and I don't want to project what that might be.
Okay.
I've got a large one. In the last meeting, somebody had suggested you had done one survey.
Can't hear.
Gosh, I thought I was loud.
You're loud there, not here.
Okay. In the last meeting, a very good suggestion was offered up to get another survey out. The first time we got the survey, it was like, what do you think? You know, we didn't have enough information. I think we're getting really close to the amount of information the community needs to provide the right vote. You know, split them up, keep them separate, or put them both at Gurney. Is there a plan to do a survey before the board makes a decision to go one way or the other?
I would say tell you we're doing the right work to get to a point where that might be a viable option. We haven't had that conversation. All of our conversations right now have been first eliminating all of the projects that were identified. Second, doing the due diligence and the work necessary. And these plans aren't thrown together. They're very well thought out. They've taken a lot of time from our teachers away from classrooms and our administrators doing visits and having conversations. So that's been our thrust to get to the point. If that's a decision point that the Board of Education and I feel is necessary, I'll reference the same statistic I gave at the last, the survey question of Philomathian directly. Do you as a taxpayer want to pay more to renovate and retain that building? And it was 40% said yes, 40% said no, and 20% said not sure. And I think that is truly reflected if you ask, you know, the opinions. Now, as we get more information, I understand your point.
Yeah, I just would propose that 20% might know a little bit more, and you might have some swaps of those 40%.
This is something I was looking at in the survey. You know, it's online. And you've quoted the 40-20-40 plan, but there's another question, and I have the results here. It's the 2-school plan voting intent, and then it's asked the other way, the 1-school plan voting intent. And that question seems to show stronger opinions.
Yeah, we could sit down and go through that, and I think I've said consistently, separation is very, very important, and that was very clear, not only in that question, if you will, and I think any survey you give, you go back and say, gosh, I'd ask that a little bit different. But the comments were, you know, this idea of separation of kindergarten and a 6th grader, how are you going to do that? And I think you've seen we've been very thoughtful in trying to provide and design around that as well.
I think the question I'm looking at was 2 campuses, but we can look that up.
Sure. I'm going to take one more question if we have it, and then we are going to be here as long as necessary, but I do want to be mindful of an individual's time tonight. Is there any more specific questions? Okay, we are available in here, so please, if there's something that you need further clarification on, let me know. If you're not one that wants to grab a microphone but would like us to reach out and ask the conversation, please write that down on the feedback sheet, and we'll be collecting those on the way out this evening. Thank you very much for attending.